I'm Paul Sullivan, your host on the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, sublime, strange, and silly aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men often feel they have to hide, or at least not talk about their parenting role. I know this from firsthand experience as the lead dad to my 3 girls, 3 dogs, 3 cats, and somewhat remarkably, 3 fish. I did this all while managing my career and striving to be an above average husband. One thing I know for sure about being a lead dad is it's not a normal role. You're not doing what dads have traditionally done, going to work and leaving the parenting to mom or someone else. Nor are you always welcome into the world where moms are the primary caregivers. But here at the Company of Dads, our goal is to shake all that off and focus on what really matters: family, friendship, finance, and fun. Today, my guest is Max Rivera, New York City firefighter and lead dad with 2 kids. He's got an amazing background, having started in the music business, worked for some high-profile restaurateurs in New York City, and after 9/11, shifted his focus to becoming a firefighter. His wife is an attorney, an in-house counsel at a large asset management firm, and he's got a son, 3.5, and a daughter, 9 months old yesterday. Welcome, Max, live from Park Slope, Brooklyn, to the Company of Dads podcast.
Yes. Thank you, Paul.
All right, I got to ask you, start off here. What's harder to respond to, a 3-alarm fire or kids screaming in the middle of the night?
Oh, man. You know what? There's a lot of overlap there because there are oftentimes kids screaming in the middle of the night at 3-alarm fires. But when they are your own children, I'd have to say that's harder. It's always, there's a lot of overlap in the job, but there's something very specific when it's your own child, and it's never easy. You never know exactly what you're doing. Whereas at a fire, we have SOPs. There's always opportunities to deviate, but the reality is we pull up to a building, we see what we see, we make a decision, and we go forward with the plan. Your child's screaming, you open the door to his room, and who knows what you're going to find. That mystery continues to stump me every single time it happens.
I remember, so I've got 3 kids, 3 daughters, 12, 9, and 4. And when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, we went to the local hospital in Stamford, Connecticut, and we did one of those parenting classes. And you sit there, and it's 6 o'clock at night. They got some donuts, you got a cup of coffee, and somebody's teaching you how to swaddle a baby, and you're like, this shit's easy. I got this. And then when you actually have a child, and it's the middle of the night, and I was like, you know what? This class would be better done like in the middle of the night, after you've had like 4 beers, you've got a full bladder, and somebody's yelling at you. So that's why I think you have a leg up on the rest of us as a firefighter. You've trained for crises, you trained under pressure. And so when you open that door, you just got to react to what you see. You're like, okay.
Yeah. A lot of guys I work with talk about that. The overnights actually being slightly easier for us as dads, given our profession, than it is for the moms. But you know what? They're feeding. They have a completely different job assignment than what we have. Oftentimes it's just wake up, go console the baby, maybe hold the baby, maybe feed the baby if the baby's being bottle fed. But certainly, like I said, there's overlap. There's something unique to being a fireman and waking up overnight and having to kind of immediately go to work.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit. We're going to focus on your role now as a lead dad and as a firefighter, and talk a little bit about your wife. But what were you doing before? How did you get into this? Tell me your kind of history before you became an NYFD firefighter.
Gosh, so I've wanted to be a firefighter since probably like 4 years old, if I'm being honest, and I think that happens to a lot of 4-year-olds. So backdraft comes out.
I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, you got the truck, the siren, the ladder. I mean, there's nothing like a 4-year. That's cool.
And honestly, like I always wanted a job that was like super straightforward, that you say, hey, this is what I do, and a 4-year-old completely, for the most part, understands what it is. So I've always admired that about the profession. It's pretty simple. Whether you're watching a movie like Gangs of New York or Backdraft, it's water on fire, and that's the best thing we've come up with since the beginning of time. So I love the tradition, and I'm fortunate enough to be a New Yorker. So my hometown team, besides the Yankees, is the FDNY. So it felt to a certain extent, not necessarily like a birthright, but just this is the team that I wanted to play for. There was no other place in the world that I'd want to be a firefighter. So at 4 years old, I see this movie and I'm like, oh my God, this is it for me. My interests kind of fade, and they take me a little bit more on a sine wave of sort of ideas and ambitions throughout my life, 9/11 happens in my hometown, in my backyard, and this renewed sort of shift kind of lights up within me, and I start thinking more seriously about becoming a firefighter. My mother sort of cautioned against me joining the fire department, and it had nothing to do with the level of danger. I mean, obviously there was some concern there, but the fire department is just like this really old guard, old institution. It feels almost impenetrable and sort of archaic in the way that they do their hiring process. It happens once every maybe 4+ years.
Wow.
Everything is dependent on a test. And most people that take the civil service test are hired if they get a perfect score. So the margins are super thin. It's like 60 to 70,000 people take the test every 4 years, and maybe 2,000 get hired. So
and did you have anybody in your family, parents, uncles, cousins? No. Okay, no firefighters.
And as you can imagine, the fire department has a lot of legacy. In particular, after 9/11, a lot of sons and daughters went on to join the ranks because of their fathers losing their lives in the line of duty. So a ton of legacy, and I had none of it. It was just a motivation from the very beginning, and I started getting this sort of obsessive level within the job. They call it being a buff, but this obsessive level and interest in wanting to join the fire department and trying to figure out what it took to join the fire department, trying to figure out what it took to get an ideal assignment. Like, not only was it enough for me to become a firefighter, but I wanted to go someplace where I would be busy, where I would get to practice my craft and go to fires. As weird as that sounds, within the world of the fire department, that's really highly sought. So I spent almost a decade trying to figure out how to become a firefighter, and I did a lot of other things along the way. But when the moment came in 2015 and I got the call, I was thrilled.
That's awesome. Talk about, I know your second firehouse and fire station. Talk about the first one, and talk about, what you've learned that was different than what you expected in being a firefighter.
Oh man. I'm trying to see if I have sort of like an anecdotal story I can share, because there's definitely a lot about the fire department that it's almost hard to articulate. You can't really fully explain, and if you're not on the job. That said, I guess I'd expected really compassionate, thoughtful, highly intelligent, highly motivated colleagues, but I was still blown away when I encountered the people that I got a chance to work with in Flatbush. I mean, Brooklyn has its own unique brand of firefighting. We're very motivated, eager to get to whatever the emergency is. And I was instantly struck by that brand and that level of sort of commitment's not the right word, because everyone on the job is committed, but it's a high level of motivation. But I found that the people were incredible. The area was really special, extremely diverse. And that's where I learned to just be a basic firefighter. We went to fires, we stretched hoses, we put out fires, and we got to learn some life lessons and have some laughs and, have a couple of hairy moments too. Yeah.
And now you're at a different unit, and talk to me a little bit about what this sort of special unit does and how it helps out, other firefighters around the city.
Yeah, sure. So after almost 6 years of fighting fires, I put in an application to join special operations. I moved to a special operations unit about 10 months ago. I changed boroughs, so I got to see something totally different. Now I'm going to fires on the 30th and 40th floors, and in the second and third subcellars, and below major landmarks and instantly recognizable places, from Grand Central to Penn Station to Madison Square Garden. Wow. It's a completely different world. And while I always understood the city and I had a relationship with Manhattan from early on, it's taken a completely different turn now as a firefighter. So I get to sort of learn about the city through that lens. Also, within special operations, we're tasked with a multitude of other sort of rescue disciplines. So high angle rope rescue, blind elevator shafts, moving heavy things through rigging, water rescue, diving into the East River and the Hudson for people that decide to go for a swim. And we're also responsible for going to every sort of fire of consequence in the borough and being a safeguard and a unit that is not only operating, but there in case of an emergency, and in particular in case of emergency for a fellow firefighter.
This is amazing. But yet at the same time, you said it can still be a little scarier going into your 3.5-year-old's room at 2 a.m.
It can. It's just, look, I take my job really personal, but it's just a different level of personal when it's your child.
One of the things when I was, you're working on the idea that became the Company of Dads, I was trying to think of, what type of men could be lead dads. And I thought, it's obviously somebody who has some level of control over their schedule. Some dads are, fully involved just with their kids, and that's cool. Some have a super flexible schedule. You can work a couple hours here, work a couple hours at night, get it done, whatever. And then there are, guys like you that have more of a fixed schedule. 3 days on, 4 days off. How does that help you sort of fulfill your responsibilities as a dad, as a lead dad, as a husband, but also as a firefighter? How is that helpful to you?
So with rare exception, I'm actually gone closer to 27-ish hours with the commute for any period of time for work, and then I have anywhere from 24 to maybe 72 hours off. It does depend. The hard part is being away from the family. That's the toughest aspect. I try not to take my work home, and I'm fortunate that I have to be in the firehouse and I have to be responding to emergencies in order to do my job. So I don't have the endless email pings that my wife gets as a corporate lawyer. But it is 2022. So we have all these other notification systems for those of us that are into knowing what firefighters doing when they're off work. So there is a little bit of I can't ever seem to get away, but I have the good fortune of being able to put the job down. The hardest part is going into work and putting the family down, because my cell phone is always ringing. There's always a crisis. There's always this child spitting up, or this person woke up twice overnight. And you want to be there. And it's so hard because it always seems like, right, those things happen when you're working.
Yeah,
and
always.
The 2 days that you're off are just totally unremarkable. But the biggest challenge, or I guess the biggest motivating factor, is I have the time away. And so that whole time I get to focus on work to the best of my abilities. Obviously, I'm always hearing about what's happening at home, but that kind of inspires me to be even more motivated and even more involved in my children's lives when I'm off work. And I try to take as much as possible off my wife's plate, because she's got a big high profile job and she's doing really important things, much more important than I'm doing in a lot of ways.
It's not about one doing, more important things than the other. It's about people, the whole ethos of the Company of Dads is people fulfilling their potential. You wanted to be a firefighter since you were 4 years old, and you've succeeded in doing that. Your wife is a corporate attorney. She's fulfilling her potential in that way. And you, as somebody who can take stuff off her plate, as you said, you as a lead dad can, help her fulfill her potential, yet you still, hey, you have an awesome job. You're in, in a New York City firefighter. It's incredible.
Yeah. No, I'm lucky to have the job that I have. I love my job. But yeah, I do things like figuring out what schools our children should go to, or play dates, or you name it. Whenever I have a day off, and particularly on weekends, when I know my wife also has a little bit more downtime, I try to be as involved as possible with the children.
It's interesting. I've talked to a lot of guys who are lead dads, and they said sometimes it's difficult to get, more traditional caregivers, moms or babysitters or nannies, to sort of engage with them to have a play date, because they're like the dad. But I'm thinking you got a built-in advantage, because you can literally show up with the fire hat, bring the boots, and the kids are like, oh my God, it's Hollis's dad. He's the coolest dad,
Yeah. And then, the tours of the firehouse and the truck it's always a good standby with all the other parents.
Yeah. When you're at the fire station and you're work engaged, Are there a lot of, firefighters who are also taking on this role of lead dad because of their schedule? Or you also talked about, I don't want you to speak for the whole fire department, more traditional and bound. I mean, is what you're doing among your colleagues sort of exceptional, or is it in 2022 becoming, more of the norm?
I think firefighters have always kind of had a small aspect of being lead dads, right? Our schedule just gives us those random Thursdays off or the opportunity to coach a little league team. That said, there definitely is a cross-generational divide between, say, the firefighters that were hired in the 90s that I work with versus some of the other colleagues I have that were kind of hired around the same era that I was hired. So the younger guys are way more lead dad kind of friendly and understand it. They get it. Some of the older guys, like, they're very involved, and I don't want to take away from their parenting, but they're a little bit more old school. So reasoning or sharing my motivations behind why I want to be as involved as I am sometimes can lead to very colorful conversations as to why guys are as involved as they are this generation and why they weren't in previous generations. But I think everyone grows from that. It doesn't necessarily change their opinions. I don't think I've ever changed anyone's opinion on my job, but it sheds light, and I'm able to say, hey, this is important to me for these reasons.
Yeah, I think about this. You may not change, look, you can't change people's minds about certain things, but so you may not change their opinions. But what I found is that in talking about this role and in making it more public and in building this community, you find that there are men out there who were like secret lead dads. Like they were doing this and they didn't feel comfortable talking about it. Now you're like, oh, you're doing that? Well, I'm doing that too, and it makes for a better conversation. And then you can share. You and I were joking before we start recording that, if you kind of look at your phone, you're like, God damn it, I can't believe she didn't get into ballet class. The other guys are going to look at you like, what are you talking about? But that's a real thing when, you and I get that, instinctively. You were talking, your daughter, 9 months old, she got some shots yesterday. So like any parent, dad or mom, you're concerned about her, how's she going to feel? Yeah.
Of course.
When your wife was pregnant, you knew you're going to have a kid, you have your son was firstborn. Did you have a conversation about, parenting roles, or was it something where you just knew that you had a schedule that was going to be, more flexible, not having those constant pings, as you said, and you'd be able to really, step in? How did that come to be?
We definitely had a few conversations, and I think the hardest thing, or the most interesting thing I'd say, is that I probably focused most of the conversations we had on the good side, which was, I'm going to have all this time I can be there. I probably should have spent more time talking about, I'm also going to be away a significant amount of time. Right. And how are we going to manage those things? And how is that going to impact your career? How is that going to impact my career? Because obviously there's times that I'm away, and there's certainly lots of offers to be away even more, right? Overtime, more trainings, opportunities to travel and train with other fire departments and other units. And that is probably the conversation we've had the most is, all right, where's the delicate balance there, right? I was raised by a single mother for the most part. And she always had those critical decisions that she needed to make, which is, do I have to call in sick for this, right? My son's going through this. I need to come up. And we almost had like a list of excuses, like, all right, we used food poisoning last month, so we're going to say kids have a dentist appointment, whatever it is, right? Because you're always just, the juggle is so hard. It's so much easier with two parents. And even that is really hard. Yeah. But no, we had a lot of conversations about, just the juggle. What is that going to look like? And there was some more unspoken understandings of, hey, those Tuesday appointments, the swim lessons, the school field trips, that's probably always going to fall on you. You're going to have the opportunity to move your schedule around or do whatever it takes to say, okay, I'll be the chaperone for the Museum of Natural History trip, or whatever the case is. And for my son, he goes to a preschool. It's a collective, it's a cooperative preschool. So every parent has a role, and there are 10 of us that have roles that are such a heavy lift that our partners don't need to have a role. So I immediately gravitated toward one of those roles. I'm on the board, and my wife doesn't have to do something at the school And there's 100 jobs. It's picking up trash in the side yard, it's snow shoveling, you name it. But being on the board has given me the opportunity to be even more involved, which I love, and it has a lasting effect on my wife's career in that she doesn't need to make time and then kind of dread the time to do something at the school because she's busy with her job.
Yeah. So much there, but let me give you one tip here. If it comes to chaperoning at the Museum of Natural History, that's okay. I've done that. You really want to put your hand up for the Bronx Zoo, because the Bronx Zoo, that's where you want to chaperone. That's good fun, because you get to be like, a kid all over again. You don't have to be serious. You're like, look at that.
Oh man.
One of the things you said is, and I remember this so well, 25 years as a journalist, 13 at the New York Times, where you sometimes have to pass up on things that you wouldn't have passed up on if you were single, or if you're married and you didn't have kids. And you talked about, extra training or traveling to, train with another fire department. And it's all professional development. It's all interesting in your craft, because you get to say, I never thought of that. That's what they did when they were going into a building like this, or I'll remember that later on. Or this is what they did when they had to get that, man, woman, child out. And you only get that through experience. And I was fortunate that for the majority of my time at the New York Times, I was a weekly columnist, so I knew exactly what I had to do. But there were times when people would say, "Hey, do you want to meet for lunch on a Tuesday?" And I would say no, because I got other stuff to do. And can you meet for lunch on Thursday? And so like I had this incredible. How have you been, managed that with your own career? So you past 10 months, you've gone to an elite unit, but how have you managed that so that you can keep fulfilling your own potential while supporting your wife and being the lead dad to your two kids?
It hasn't been easy, and I'll also throw in there's a huge social component to my job, and I think that's largely because it feels very fraternal. It feels a lot like a fraternity, and given the high level of kind of risk and some of the almost like PTSD-inducing things that we experience together as a group, it's really essential that we all decompress together too. And we have these experiences, like I said earlier, that only another firefighter could understand. So the missing out on social stuff, the golf trips, the baseball game, the open bar, the bachelor party, that's also just as important, because you'd be surprised. Everyone gets around the table and maybe has a beer or two, and suddenly we're going back to talking about what we know. It's not always just the parenting or the juggling of the schedules or the innocuous conversations. It's the important stuff too. There I was in that hallway. I found this door. I couldn't believe I saw a person under this bed. Wouldn't you know, the apartment had 3 bathrooms. Who knows? But those sort of tangential conversations that only occur in really organic settings, you miss out on. At the end of the day, my family is super important. I have to come home to them. Like, I have a really fun time at work. I'm thankful every day I get to do my job, because it's a young man's game. I'm thankful even more so every day I get to come home from my job, because sadly not every single person I've worked with has had that chance. When it's all said and done, I know my family will be proud of everything I've accomplished in my professional life, but what matters most to them is, I think, my time and my opportunity to be with them. And I think those are the memories that they'll take with them for as long as they can remember. So that's how I make those decisions. Is in the moment, it can be really hard, and I never want to pass up on training or opportunity to work extra, earn a couple extra bucks. It is New York City after all, but it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing you say is that the balance is almost to be present in 2 very different worlds. To be present as as a dad, lead dad, as a husband, when you're home and be there with the kids, but also to be present with your colleagues, with your fellow, firefighters. And there's something, sometimes a beer isn't just a beer. Sometimes, a couple beers is you're bonding. I mean, I was fortunate to be able to address years ago, the cadets up at West Point. And what they're doing up there is they're building this sense of shared sacrifice. We are all in this together to do this common goal. And I think it's very similar, in the fire department. Like, you're getting there together, and then you're building trust, and I can trust that guy. He's going to be there. He's going to be on my right. And the flip side of it is, Jesus, I don't think I can trust that guy as much. And knowing those things is really crucial, but it's all about, being present in two very, very distinct worlds.
Yeah, I think probably my childhood and experience growing up sort of informed that the most, right? I'm mixed race. I spent time on both coasts. That duality and that shift has always existed within me. And some people have been critical of it, or there's a lot of cultural things that are critical of that sort of code switching, that shifting. I've always viewed it as a survival mechanism, as something that I've needed to use appropriately at times to kind of navigate worlds and navigate various extremes and polarities. That juxtaposition has always kind of been within me. And now I'm just applying it to my professional life and my family life.
Max Rivera, thank you so much for being a guest on the Company of Dads podcast. I always like to give my guests the last word. So parting thoughts on being a lead dad from you.
I guess everyone can be a lead dad if they're involved. Just stay involved and listen to your kids. I have young kids and they just started talking, and there's a lot to listen to.
That's great. I lied. I want to ask one last question. And that's,
Yeah, go ahead.
if you get the opportunity for training, you're a lifelong New York Yankees fan, and you have to go for firefighter training up in Boston, Red Sox Nation. Do you go? Do you do it? Or do you say, no, I can't do it? I'm a Yankees fan.
Oh, man. I'd have to go. I respect those guys. Those guys are just as aggressive as we are here in New York City. They have a great pedigree and a great history, but that's not to say I'm not wearing my Mariano Rivera jersey.
I love it. I love it. Enter Sandman. Max, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul.